This woman's name is Chloe, and she's 22 years old. Right now, she's being called the villain in a story that she believes she never deserved to be part of. Why? Because she had feelings. Because she wanted to keep someone she truly cared about in her life. Because she didn't think 3 years of memories and connection should just vanish because the romantic spark died out. I'm Emma, your storyteller here at Mrs. Emma, and today I'm bringing you a story that will make you question everything you thought you knew about breakups, boundaries, and what it really means to let someone go. Chloe and Landon's story started when they were practically children. She was 19, he was 18. It was their senior year of high school. And like so many young couples, they thought what they had would last forever. 3 entire years of Chloe's life were spent with this boy. 3 years of late-night conversations, shared dreams, and building what she thought was an unbreakable bond. But here's the thing about relationships that start when you're young. They change. You change. And according to Chloe, that's exactly what happened. When they both started college, things got messy, complicated. The easy flow of their high school romance started hitting obstacles, and suddenly, being together required actual work instead of just coasting on butterflies and teenage infatuation. Chloe says this is normal. Everyone goes through rough patches, right? But apparently, Landon couldn't handle the reality that love isn't always effortless, that sometimes you have to fight for it, adjust to it, grow with it. About 6 months before Chloe ended things, she started noticing changes in Landon. Big changes. The fun, carefree guy she'd fallen for during freshman year, the one who was always ready for parties and spontaneous adventures, suddenly transformed into someone she barely recognized. He became what she calls Mr. Serious Boyfriend. Every moment became about them. Every decision required discussion. He wanted to study together constantly. He needed to know where she was going, what she was doing, who she'd be with. The questions never stopped. The check-ins became relentless. And to Chloe, it felt like drowning. Like she was losing herself in someone else's need for constant reassurance. She says he was trying to prove something, trying to show her how committed he could be, how serious he was about their relationship. But it didn't feel natural to her anymore. It felt forced, suffocating, like he was clinging to something that was already slipping through his fingers. The text messages had to be answered immediately. Every single plan had to include both of them. The thought of Chloe having a girls' night or doing something on her own would make Landon's face fall. She describes this look he'd get, like she was abandoning him. Like her needing space meant she didn't love him anymore. Chloe tried dropping hints. She suggested they try new things, explore different activities, maybe spend a little less time attached at the hip. But every hint was met with more effort from Landon. More flowers appeared at her door, more surprise visits. More of what she calls that intense, staring thing he'd do when he thought she wasn't looking. To her, it felt desperate. And the more desperate he became, the more she pulled away. Meanwhile, their friends saw something completely different. To everyone else, Chloe and Landon were couple goals. So cute together. So perfect. So meant to be. Every social media post got flooded with heart emojis and comments about relationship envy. But inside, Chloe was screaming. She felt trapped, bored, suffocated by expectations that didn't match her reality. Yet she couldn't say anything because then she'd look ungrateful. She'd be the girl who didn't appreciate a good guy, the girl who threw away something precious for no reason. And yes, she admits he was good to her, thoughtful, kind, caring. But she makes an important distinction here. Good and right for her are two very different things. That's when Chloe started noticing other guys. Not in a way that crossed lines, she's quick to clarify. She's not that person. She didn't cheat. But she found herself paying attention to the funny guy in her psychology class who made her laugh without trying so hard. The guys at parties who could just be in the moment without analyzing every interaction or making everything about relationship status. These observations made her realize what was missing. The lightness. The ease. The excitement. All the things that used to exist with Landon but had slowly evaporated under the weight of his intensity. Every time Chloe tried to talk about her feelings, Landon would panic. His eyes would go wide with fear, and he'd immediately start asking what he could do better, how he could change, what he needed to fix. But that was the problem, Chloe explains. He couldn't just hear that maybe they weren't working anymore. Everything had to be fixable. She was a problem to be solved rather than a person who might genuinely want something different from life. After months of feeling like she was slowly losing herself, Chloe finally did what she'd been putting off. She sat Landon down and told him her truth. She loved him, but she wasn't in love with him anymore. The spark had died, and she didn't believe it was coming back. They'd grown into different people, and maybe that was okay. Maybe that was just part of life. His reaction? Silence. 5 full minutes of staring at her like she'd announced someone had died. Then came the question that hurt her most. Is there someone else? To Chloe, this question proved how little Landon understood her. This wasn't about another guy. This was about her, about what she needed, about being honest enough to admit when something wasn't working instead of forcing it out of obligation or fear. Here's where Chloe thought she was being mature and reasonable. She told Landon they could still be friends. Just because the romantic part wasn't working didn't mean they had to lose each other completely. They had so much history together. So many good memories. He knew her better than almost anyone. She genuinely meant it when she said she wanted him in her life. But Landon said he needed space to process everything. He couldn't just flip a switch and be her friend. Chloe says she understands this in theory, but it felt like punishment. Like he was making her pay for being honest about her feelings, as if she was supposed to stay in a relationship that made her unhappy just to protect him from pain. The whole situation frustrated her beyond words. She could have ghosted him. She could have cheated. She could have been cruel. Instead, she chose honesty. She tried to preserve what was good between them, and somehow that made her the villain. 3 years of her life were spent with this person. She wasn't going to pretend that meant nothing just because the romantic chapter had closed. But now everyone was acting like she was heartless, like she'd led him on and then destroyed him, when really she was just brave enough to admit the truth instead of staying miserable to keep up appearances. Chloe genuinely believed Landon would come around. She thought that once he had time to process everything, he'd realize they could still be friends. After all, they'd been best friends before they were anything else. You don't just throw that away, right? But Landon seemed determined to make everything as difficult as possible. After giving him a week of space, which felt like forever to Chloe, she sent him a simple text. Nothing dramatic or relationship-focused. Just basic human decency, checking in to see how he was doing. He left her on red for 3 days, so she changed her approach. They used to study together at a coffee place near campus, so Chloe started going there during what used to be their study hours. Not to ambush him, she insists, just to be available if he wanted to talk. The first time she saw him there, she waved. He literally packed up all his belongings and walked out. The drama of it all frustrated her to no end. Chloe was starting to feel genuinely hurt by how cold he was being. She wasn't asking him to date her again. She just wanted her friend back. Was that really so unreasonable? Her roommate Kira kept telling her to give Landon more time, but Chloe couldn't understand why. How much time does someone need to accept reality? They broke up. They could still care about each other. Life moves forward. It's not that complicated unless you choose to make it complicated. Chloe started reaching out to their mutual friends to check on Landon's well-being. Not in a stalker way, she clarifies, just normal concerned friend behavior. But even this became too much. People started getting weird with her about it. Jenna from their friend group actually told Chloe she should let Landon heal in peace. Heal from what? Chloe wondered. They'd had an amicable breakup where she'd been nothing but honest and kind. What really bothered her was finding out that Landon had been telling people he needed space from her specifically. Not space in general, space from her. Like she was toxic. Like she was someone he needed to recover from rather than someone who'd been nothing but good to him for 3 years. Chloe found this deeply insulting. She tried a different strategy, including Landon in group activities, study groups, movie nights, casual hangouts where it wouldn't be weird for both of them to be there. But he'd either skip these events or leave early when she showed up. It felt like active avoidance, which struck her as hurtful and petty. The worst part was watching their friend group become awkward about the whole situation. People started organizing separate hangouts or conveniently forgetting to invite one of them. It was like everyone thought they couldn't be in the same room like mature adults. Chloe kept trying to show everyone she was fine, that this didn't have to be weird. But she felt like Landon was making everything dramatic by refusing to just be normal. Chloe remembers one specific attempt to reach out. She brought cookies to Landon's dorm, the kind his mom used to make that he always said he missed. She thought it was a sweet gesture that showed she still cared about him as a person. When she knocked, his roommate answered and said Landon wasn't there. But Chloe could literally see his backpack sitting by the door. He was obviously hiding from her like a child. That's when she realized Landon was probably telling people she was being too much. Suddenly, everyone had opinions about how she should handle the situation. People who barely knew their relationship were telling her she needed to respect his boundaries and give him what he asked for. But nobody seemed to care about her feelings. Nobody cared about her need to maintain important relationships in her life. Chloe started feeling like she was being painted as a crazy ex-girlfriend, when really she was just trying to preserve a friendship with someone she genuinely cared about. The whole thing frustrated her endlessly because she was being the mature one, trying to handle this like an adult, while Landon was throwing away a 3-year friendship because his feelings got hurt. Honestly, part of Chloe started thinking he was doing this on purpose. Like maybe he thought if he held their friendship hostage, she'd realize she'd made a mistake and want him back romantically. If that was his strategy, she found it manipulative and completely missing the point of why she'd ended things. The situation got even more ridiculous when Landon started acting like Chloe was stalking him for trying to maintain normal social connections. They went to the same college. They had the same friends. They were in some of the same classes. Did he expect her to just vanish into thin air? But apparently, showing up to places where she knew he'd be was crossing boundaries. According to who? Chloe wondered. They're both adults. They both have the right to exist in the same spaces. If he felt uncomfortable, maybe he should examine why instead of trying to make her feel guilty for living her life. The breaking point came when Chloe heard through their friend group that Landon had been complaining about her to basically anyone who would listen. Suddenly, everyone had something to say about her behavior, like they knew the full story. People who weren't even there for their relationship were acting like experts on what she should or shouldn't do. So Chloe decided to try talking to his family. His mom and she had always gotten along great, and she thought maybe his mother could help him see reason. She sent a message on Facebook explaining that she missed their family and hoped they could still have some kind of relationship even though she and Landon weren't together anymore. Normal stuff that people do after amicable breakups, right? But apparently that was crossing a line too. Landon's sister actually called Chloe and told her to stop contacting their family because it was making Landon uncomfortable. Excuse me, Chloe thought. She'd spent 3 years being part of that family, going to their holiday dinners, building real relationships with these people. And now she was just supposed to pretend none of that mattered? It was becoming crystal clear that Landon was turning everyone against her, making her out to be this desperate ex who couldn't take a hint, when really she was just trying to salvage something good from a situation that didn't have to be all or nothing. Chloe started noticing more signs. Landon would leave group chats when she joined them. He'd make excuses not to come to parties if he knew she'd be there. He was literally restructuring his entire social life around avoiding her, which felt not only dramatic, but also really unfair to their mutual friends caught in the middle. What drove Chloe crazy was how everyone acted like Landon's feelings were the only ones that mattered. What about her feelings? What about the fact that she was losing her best friend and nobody seemed to care? She was grieving too, but apparently her grief didn't count because she was the one who ended the romantic relationship. Then came the incident that Chloe says really showed Landon's true colors. She was having a panic attack outside the library, completely unrelated to him, just stress from school and everything else going on in her life. Landon happened to walk by and saw her crying. For a second, the old Landon came back. He sat with her, made sure she was okay, even walked her back to her dorm. Chloe felt so hopeful. Maybe they'd finally turned a corner. Maybe he realized they could care about each other without it being romantic. But the next day, he was back to ignoring her. That moment of human decency was just a blip, and now they were back to the cold shoulder treatment. Chloe found this honestly cruel. To give her hope like that and then snatch it away felt like games. Like he was trying to keep her on an emotional roller coaster, because he was still hurt about the breakup. She found this manipulative and beneath the person she thought he was. She deserved better than these mind games, especially from someone who claimed to have loved her. Chloe tried talking to him about it directly. She caught him after class and asked if they could please just have one honest conversation about where they stood. But he simply said he'd been clear about needing space and walked away. like she was some stranger bothering him instead of someone who'd been his partner and best friend for 3 years. That's when Chloe knew she had to protect herself. If he wanted to throw away everything they'd built together over hurt feelings, that was his choice. But she wasn't going to keep chasing someone who was determined to make her feel like garbage for caring about him. Everything came to a head in what Chloe describes as the most embarrassing way possible. She was just trying to return his sweatshirt that she'd had for months, being considerate and mature about tying up loose ends. She knew Landon worked at the tutoring center, so she stopped by during what she thought was a quiet time. But apparently showing up at his job was some kind of major violation. The second he saw her, his whole attitude shifted. Right in front of his coworkers and students, he started raising his voice, telling her to stop showing up places and leave him alone, like she was some crazed stalker instead of someone returning his property. Chloe was so shocked she couldn't even respond properly. Here she was trying to do the right thing, and he was treating her like she was harassing him, in public, with witnesses. It was humiliating and completely uncalled for. All she wanted was to give him his stuff back and maybe have a normal human conversation. But he turned it into this huge, dramatic scene. The worst part was how everyone was staring. These random students and his coworkers looking at her like she was unhinged, when really Landon was the one who escalated everything by making a big deal out of nothing. She literally just walked in with a sweatshirt, and suddenly she's the villain. Chloe tried to explain that she was just returning his things, but he cut her off and said something about harassment and needing to respect his boundaries. Harassment? For returning borrowed clothes? The whole thing felt so blown out of proportion. Between us, Chloe thinks he'd been waiting for an excuse to make her look crazy in front of other people. Like he wanted witnesses to see him standing up for himself so he could play the victim even more. Because there's no way a normal person reacts that strongly to someone returning their property. She left, obviously, because she wasn't going to stand there and be humiliated. But she was shaking. She was so upset. Not because she still had romantic feelings for him, but because someone she'd cared about for 3 years had just treated her like garbage in front of strangers. It felt cruel and unnecessary and showed her who he really was underneath that nice guy act. Within hours, Chloe started getting texts from people who'd heard about what happened. Apparently, Landon's version of events made it sound like she'd shown up screaming and demanding to get back together or something equally dramatic, which was completely false. But of course, everyone believed him because he was the heartbroken victim in this whole situation. Chloe tried explaining to people what actually happened, but she felt like she was just making excuses and not taking responsibility. Taking responsibility for what? Returning someone's belongings? Trying to be mature about an awkward situation? She was the one trying to handle things like an adult while he was having public meltdowns. That's when she realized Landon had been setting her up for this, making her out to be the crazy ex so that when he finally snapped, everyone would be on his side. It felt manipulative and honestly kind of sick that he'd planned it out like that just to make himself look better. Even Chloe's roommate Kira started giving her grief about it, saying she should have known better than to go to his job. Known better than what? She was being considerate by returning his things instead of just keeping them or throwing them away. But apparently, even basic courtesy was too much to ask for. The whole thing just confirmed what Chloe had been thinking. That Landon couldn't handle mature adult relationships. He wanted everything to be black and white, all or nothing, instead of acknowledging that people can care about each other in different ways. His inability to see nuance was probably part of why their romantic relationship didn't work in the first place. Chloe decided right then that she was done trying to reason with someone who was determined to misunderstand her. If he wanted to burn bridges and turn people against her, that said way more about his character than hers. She'd tried to preserve their friendship. She'd tried to be mature about everything. And this was how he repaid her. Fine, his loss. After that humiliating scene at the tutoring center, Chloe figured people would see how unreasonable Landon was being. Like, who reacts that strongly to someone returning their property? But apparently everyone thought she was the problem, which says more about them than her. Her roommate Kira completely blindsided her by taking Landon's side. She actually sat Chloe down for some kind of intervention, telling her that her behavior had been concerning and that she needed to reflect on her actions. Reflect on what exactly? Trying to maintain a friendship with someone she cared about? The whole conversation felt so condescending and unfair. But Kira wasn't the only one. Suddenly, everyone had opinions about what Chloe should or shouldn't have done. People who barely knew their relationship were acting like experts, telling her she should have just left him alone from the beginning. Easy for them to say when they've never had to navigate losing their best friend over something as basic as hurt feelings. The worst part was how they all acted like she was being obsessive or unable to let go, which felt completely ridiculous because this was never about getting him back romantically. She'd been perfectly clear about that from day one. She just didn't think they had to lose their entire friendship because the romantic part didn't work out. Then people started avoiding her. Not in an obvious way, but she noticed. Group chats getting quieter when she joined, people making excuses when she suggested hanging out, that awkward silence when she walked into a room. It was like they all had some secret meeting where they decided she was the villain in this situation. And you know what the really messed up part was? Chloe started hearing through the grapevine that Landon was doing great. People would mention how happy he seemed, how he was really thriving now, like her absence from his life was some kind of gift instead of a loss, which honestly hurt more than she expected. Between us, Chloe thinks people were just taking his side because they felt sorry for him. Poor little Landon got his heart broken by the mean girl who didn't want to be with him anymore. Never mind that she tried to handle everything as kindly as possible, or that she genuinely wanted to preserve their friendship. The narrative was already written, and she was the villain. She started noticing how differently people talked to her, like they were walking on eggshells or waiting for her to do something crazy. It was so frustrating because she'd never done anything actually wrong, but somehow she was being treated like she was unhinged. The breaking point came when Chloe heard Landon had started casually seeing someone, some girl from his engineering program who was apparently really sweet and good for him. Fine. Good for him, she guessed. But the way people talked about it, like this new girl was upgrading his life or something, felt really insulting to their entire 3-year relationship. Chloe tried to be mature about it. She really did. But seeing posts of them together, hearing people talk about how cute they were, it was hard not to feel like everyone was celebrating the fact that he'd moved on from her. Like their relationship had been some burden he was finally free from. And honestly, it started to really bother her how quickly everyone forgot that she had feelings too. Like she was supposed to just disappear quietly and let everyone move on without her. Well, sorry, but she existed in this friend group before Landon, and she didn't see why she should have to lose all her social connections because he couldn't handle being around her. So Chloe started speaking up more. When people would gush about his new relationship, she'd remind them that she and Landon had had good times too. When they'd act like he was better off without her, she'd point out that she'd been nothing but supportive during their relationship. Just basic facts that apparently made people uncomfortable. But even that was too much, according to some people. Apparently she was supposed to just smile and nod while everyone acted like her 3-year relationship had been meaningless. Sorry, but Chloe has self-respect, and she wasn't going to pretend their history didn't matter just to make other people comfortable. That's when she realized these people had never really been her friends anyway. Real friends would have understood both sides instead of just picking a team. Real friends would have cared about her feelings too, not just his. The whole situation really showed her who people actually were when things got complicated. Everything completely fell apart at what was supposed to be a normal house party. Chloe wasn't even planning to go originally, but Kira convinced her it would be good to get out and show everyone she was doing fine. Which she was, by the way. She was doing perfectly fine and just wanted to have a normal social experience without everything being about Landon. But of course he was there with her, his new girlfriend, and everyone was acting like they were the cutest thing ever, which was honestly nauseating to watch. Not because Chloe wanted him back, but because it was so obvious everyone was overcompensating to show how much they approved of his upgrade. Chloe tried to just enjoy herself and ignore the whole situation, but people kept making these pointed comments. Like when someone said it's so nice to see Landon happy again, right in front of her. Or when his new girlfriend got introduced around like she was meeting royalty. The whole thing felt so transparently designed to make Chloe feel like garbage. Between us, she'd had a few drinks by that point, and she was getting really tired of pretending everything was fine. So when she overheard them talking about some trip they were planning together, the same kind of trip Landon used to say they couldn't afford when he was with Chloe, she might have made a comment about how convenient that was. Apparently that was starting drama, because suddenly everyone was staring at her like she'd committed some major social crime for making one observation about the irony of the situation. But when his new girlfriend made little passive-aggressive comments about moving forward and leaving the past behind, That was totally fine, apparently. The whole thing escalated when Landon came over and told Chloe she was making people uncomfortable and needed to find somewhere else to be. At his friend's party, a party she'd been invited to. Like she was some party crasher instead of someone who'd been part of this group for years. And that's when Chloe completely lost it. Because she was so tired of being painted as the villain for having normal human emotions. So tired of everyone acting like she was supposed to just disappear quietly while he got to keep all their mutual friends and start fresh like their relationship had never mattered. She told him exactly what she thought, about how he'd turned everyone against her, how he'd made her out to be some crazy ex when she'd only ever tried to be his friend. How convenient it was that he'd found someone new so quickly after claiming he needed space to heal. Just basic truths that apparently no one wanted to hear. But somehow, her telling the truth became this huge scene. People started recording on their phones. Someone called her unhinged, and suddenly she was being asked to leave by people who'd known her for years, all for defending herself against someone who'd been systematically destroying her reputation for months. The worst part was watching everyone's faces, like they were seeing confirmation of what they'd already decided about her. Not the months of her trying to be reasonable. Not all the times she'd been mature about an impossible situation. Just this one moment where she finally stood up for herself. Chloe left, obviously, because she wasn't going to stand there and be ganged up on by people who had already made up their minds about her. But the damage was done. Within hours, that video was everywhere. People who hadn't even been at the party were sharing it and making comments about crazy ex behavior. And you know what the really messed up part is? Chloe still doesn't think she did anything wrong. Was she supposed to just stand there and let him humiliate her in front of everyone? Was she supposed to smile and nod while people celebrated how much better his life was without her? She's human. She has feelings. And sometimes those feelings are going to come out when people push you too far. But apparently having feelings makes you crazy when you're the ex-girlfriend. Landon gets to play victim and everyone rallies around him. But Chloe defends herself once and suddenly she's the villain of the story. The whole thing just proved that this was never about her actual behavior. People had already decided she was the bad guy and they were just waiting for evidence to confirm it. So here we are at the end of Chloe's story. A young woman who believed she tried to do everything right. Who wanted to be honest instead of cruel. Who thought 3 years of friendship meant something beyond romance. And who now finds herself completely isolated, branded as the crazy ex. All because she couldn't just disappear quietly when the relationship ended. Is she the villain she's been made out to be? Or is this a story about boundaries that weren't respected? About someone who couldn't hear no even when it was said with kindness? I'm Emma, and I want to hear what you think. Because stories like this, they're never really just one person's truth, are they? They're complicated, messy, full of perspectives that don't always line up. If this story made you think, if it made you feel something, if it reminded you of your own experiences, or challenged what you thought you knew about breakups and boundaries, then please hit that like button. Share this video with your friends who might need to hear it. And make sure you subscribe to Mrs. Emma so you never miss these stories that dig into the complicated, messy, real parts of relationships and life. Because the truth is, we all see ourselves as the hero of our own story. But sometimes, just sometimes, we might need to step back and ask ourselves if we're seeing the whole picture. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.